lot has happened since then. And yes, we spoke about the book when he was here the first time, but let's talk about him. I'm talking about Full Circle Africa CEO Vishal Agarwal. Karibu sana, welcome back to the show.
Good morning, Jeff. How are you?
Morning.
I didn't get the memo in color.
No, we don't really know what happens. We get here and we find we're all color coordinated in red. You should have seen us yesterday. It was a very colorful set.
It was very colorful.
All in red.
Wonderful. Well, you all look wonderful this morning.
Thank you so much, Vishal. And it's been quite a while since you were last here.
Yes.
Last time you were here, it was all about giving to get.
That's right.
Launched the book.
That's right.
How did that run go? Because we saw you've been all over the place. You've toured the world with the book.
I'm overwhelmed. I'm absolutely overwhelmed. And I'm just absolutely grateful for the feedback and support. I had no idea that it would turn out the way it is. You know, I live on Riverside Drive, right? And this book is resonating with people from Silicon Valley to Perth. I've had the chance to travel to all kinds of countries and been on radio shows, and I've done a dozen radio shows in the US and Canada and Australia. I was on BBC, as you know. And just the feedback, it seems like this topic is really resonating very hard with people. I mean, I thought that it might resonate with mid to senior level managers, but the personal notes that I get from people, I got a lovely note from you, so thank you for your feedback.
You're absolutely welcome. And just when you think about it, because most of your life you've been in the corporate circles, you've been going up the ladder, you've worked
my entire life.
Your entire life. That's what you've been doing, and then you decided to take a brief break, write a book. So you're not a business author. You decided to put your thoughts on what you've gone throughout the years and put your pen to paper. What do you think resonated with so many people when it came to that particular book?
Well, you know, the feedback that I get from a lot of people is they see themselves in those stories. And if you actually think about, you know, how we resonate with people, if you can relate to stories, if you can see hopes and aspirations and endurance and fatigue in those stories, then you kind of say, well, this relates to me, or I can learn from this, or this person has touched me. And I think that's kind of the magic of what's happened, that I've been able to, you know, from a simplistic standpoint, talk to people, and in their own time, they've been able to consume it and then give feedback. So, so I'm very grateful for that. And
because even when you look at how the book has gone, I'm talking about the fact that when I say that the book has done well, it's because when you do your research on Give to Get, Inc. magazine is talking about it, Forbes is talking about it, BBC is talking about this particular book. And
I'm absolutely overwhelmed.
And this is the first book by a guy who decided, you know what, I've been doing this for a while, let me just put pen to paper and find out what's going on and tell the people my thoughts on my journey up the ladder.
You know, and what's really worth bragging about, not for me, for us, and I really kind of mean it genuinely from an Africa story standpoint, is that for all these international outlets to kind of recognize, embrace, resonate with a business author from Nairobi, Kenya, I think is my proudest moment, right? That, you know, if New York Post runs a Sunday story or BBC has me on, I don't see it as my win. I see it as, I generally mean it, I see it as our win. And I really feel that more of our leaders should come out and tell their stories, because clearly there's an interest. We talked about it last time. It's a pet peeve for me that we keep consuming from the West. We keep consuming all the stuff about leadership and business and how to from all over the world. But we can tell our own tales to our own young people and old people and peers, and export those stories like we export our flowers.
Right, right. So you can take that and just take it to the world as well and let them learn from what we've gone through as well.
That's right.
And when you've gone around, either, in terms of promoting the book or the speeches that you've given, you've done numerous keynotes all over the place. When you talk to these young leaders who are also eager to go up the ladder or at a certain point and wondering how to navigate because now they're at the top, what have you been hearing from them? What are the troubles they're facing now? Because I'm sure since you started, up until now, things have changed.
Yes.
So what are some of the problems they're dealing with now?
So I sort of filter it into kind of 4 areas that, whether it is young people or even really seasoned leaders, talk a lot about endurance and want to hear about how do I develop patience and endure this grind. Let's leave it at that from a simplistic standpoint. Then I think leaders and young people want to know about navigating culture, right? That's kind of a big theme. How do I navigate culture? Whether I'm a new person, I get a new role. How do I build teams is a big part of it. And then having sort of practical takeaways that they can actually implement. So hungry for mentorship, right? And I think that what has really surprised me, I'm not entirely surprised that young people are hungry for mentorship, right? And young leaders and those that are newer in the workforce are hungry for mentorship. What I'm really surprised by is that senior leaders are really hungry for mentorship. And they feel very alone. And they feel that they can't talk to people. And they're feeling all of this pain, but feel very lonely in those conversations. The conversations that I'm having today in boardrooms, the deep dives with my book, or the themes of my book in boardrooms, let alone in larger audiences invited in as keynote, I think that's where there's so much of interaction and feedback. And I feel there's so much more intellectual fodder for myself, right? I'm learning so much.
True.
Right.
And let's talk about a bit yourself as well. There's all of this you've learned from these people, but you also have an interesting journey, because when you look at the progress of your career, Vishal, we're talking about the fact that PwC, really high up the ladder, you move to GE, everything is going so well, and then you decide to jump off the ledge and become an entrepreneur. Who does that when everything is working out?
Well, I think that an entrepreneur is not a switch on, switch off. I would remind you and everybody that speaking for myself, I've always been an entrepreneur.
Right.
And a lot of people are entrepreneurs at heart and entrepreneurs in how they navigate their own corporate lives. I've just decided to work for myself. That's what you're trying to say. And I think after 24, 25 years, I think that with God's grace, I felt that I was in a position in my life where this was the right time to use my years of experience and perhaps some business maturity and relationships and try and apply them to my own life. And that's what I'm doing, and I'm enjoying it.
And it's interesting that you point that out, and let's unpack that a bit, because when you say you've always been an entrepreneur at heart, and it's something you've always used, regardless of which organization you were working for, even at that time, what does entrepreneurship really mean when, in your understanding, when you talk about that?
Well, I think for me it's nimbleness, creativity, enterprise, being commercial, right? You know, how you can go really fast, bringing commercial intensity to it, and really kind of, you know, the enterprise aspect of it, bringing creativity and innovation into it, is the heart of being an entrepreneur. I think people have mixed the idea of working for yourself and the spirit of entrepreneurship. Just because I might work for corporate doesn't mean I can't be entrepreneurial. Right? So I think that's kind of where the world has meshed things up a little bit. But I think that you'll find a lot of corporate guys, and I know that in your case, you have a real entrepreneurial streak from my interaction. And I think that's really important to express and nurture and give more fodder to.
Absolutely. And when you talk about the transition from working for these organizations to working for yourself, what was the biggest change you encountered as you made that transition?
Well, I think, look, after 24 years, I certainly had structure and discipline, which I find in my, you know, as a venture capitalist now, I find with a lot of the founders and younger companies that I'm betting on, they don't have. So coming into this new world for myself, having structure and discipline, waking up in the morning, getting to work on time, wearing a suit and tie, getting stuff done, I think that kind of discipline is really important from a business aspect standpoint. The other bits, on a more higher level, the other bits that I really have enjoyed is that I have a clearer mind. Right? I'm not running around airports every week.
Right.
And I have more time to be able to process, and therefore I'm able to see things a little more clearly, and I find I'm more productive for myself. So that I'm able to achieve so much in so short period of time. So, and I really call upon business leaders to try it. Right?
Okay.
You know, how long are you going to be in this corporate grind?
Very true, very true. And even before you just get a brief overview on what Full Circle Africa does, there's something interesting you've pointed out about, wearing a suit and tie, going to work, making sure you do your 9 to 5, that proper discipline. And you're an advocate of, the business suit to work.
Yes.
Why is that? Because the more we look at, corporate culture now, people are now dressing back, dressing down, T-shirts to work,
Yeah.
you don't have to wear a tie. Well, yes, let's leave it at that for now. But why do you feel it's so important, especially in business circles, to make sure you're suited up every single time you show up at the office?
Well, this thing has gotten so much of play. Call me old-fashioned, but this particular topic has gotten a lot of play. From New York Post to Australia, it's gotten a hell of a lot of play. And I think that, to your point, while there is a lot of shift towards dressing down, people like me will always advocate for dressing well, because I think you're an ambassador of the brand, the Jeff brand, but also your employer's brand. How you interact with people, how you present the company to stakeholders is really important. And it goes back in terms of how this comes about for myself to my very early outset days, where I've told you the story before. I went up to a senior partner of mine when I was a young intern at Legacy Pricewaterhouse in 1992, and sort of said, look, it's Washington, humid summers, can we all dress down for the summer? And he said, well, sit down, let me talk to you a little bit. How do warriors go to the battlefield? What do they dress in? And I said, well, I don't know why you're asking me this, but armor. And he said, well, when you come to work, shouldn't you be dressed for work? You're not going to wear your pajamas or jeans and T-shirt. And I'm not saying there isn't a place for jeans and T-shirt. It's just not in my workplace, right?
Okay, and let's move from that to your actual workplace, because the book is just a side things of what you're doing. 9 to 5, you're busy making big bets on companies that you feel have a future.
Yes.
Let's talk about Full Circle Africa. What's that really all about? What does Vishal do 9 to 5?
So in my new avatar, I'm focused on 3 areas, which I think are growing from a region standpoint. Venture capital. So I'm an active venture capitalist, and I'm working with founders across Pan-Africa. We've closed 6 deals across the region. And these are from post-seed to what is referred to as the A-B round. And hopefully we'll take the suite of founders and position them for institutional investors, whether by getting them exposed to Silicon Valley kind of investors or investors out of the East. So that's kind of what's happening in that portfolio. I'm doing industrial finance. What is industrial finance? If you think about asset financing, car financing, and that kind of stuff, industrial finance is the industrial side of that. For example, it's primarily healthcare equipment for now, so betting on and lending against healthcare equipment. And then the third piece of what the business does leverage buyouts. So we're looking at assets that we could work with and take over as a investment holding company. So that's primarily what the business does.
Okay, so just by virtue of what you're doing across the region,
Yes.
your entry is full. I mean,
Yes.
you're busy, and I'm sure even from time to time you're rubbing shoulders with different leaders of industry. And you're, having a drink, having a coffee.
Sure.
Would you tell them it's time that they also decided to just write a book?
Yes, and let me tell you why, Jeff. I talk about this a lot, actually, exactly in the kind of setting that you're talking about. And I had this penny drop moment in my own journey where I kind of said, look, if you think about my late grandfather, if he was alive, he would be about 107, a very old 107. He's been gone a long time. So in his time, when he was about my age, I'm in denial, but when he was about my age, would you believe that there were probably not 10% of people in his demographic around him that actually had a college degree at that time, right? Because you're talking about, 60 years ago, 10% people in that grandfather's demographic had college degrees. Today, do you know 10% people in your demographic that don't have a college degree? In that kind of professional setting.
Right.
So the world has really changed. The number of Ivy Leaguers around us, Strathmore graduates around us, University of Nairobi, architects around us are enormous. So the role of an expert is muddied, I feel, by Twitter and social media. You know, finding the expert or the true professional in that noise is very difficult. So I feel for business leaders, for experts to come out and tell their story, the book is that 10%, because how many people do you know that have actually tried doing one?
Right.
So I think this is kind of, you know, the new avatar of what an expert looks like, as self-serving as it sounds. I think that's what business leaders should do, and not write vanity books like you would have talked about.
That's what
before,
I was about
right?
to ask, because some leaders might write a book, and you go through it, and as someone who's probably looking for some business advice or some mentorship of some sort by extension through the book,
Yes.
there's really not much. He'll just list his achievements from, you know, the first chapter to the end, and after that, it's done. You're done with the book.
Well, I'll tell you without getting into names and details, I was recently invited in by a friend, a very senior business leader in this town, C-suite leader, very well known and loved. And I sat down with him a little bit, and he's been thinking about writing his book and working on it. And I said to him, well, what is the title? And he looked at me and said, well, my name. And I said, well, what does the cover look like? And he showed me his picture. So I said, listen, this is all well and good, but beyond your memoirs, which are precious and very important and tell a tale, how many people outside of Nairobi or this country will actually read it? And would you not like people in Lagos and Joburg and Perth and China and elsewhere to read your story? Now, why would they read your story? I mean, think about where these millennials are, and why write about your story? Why not write about the stories that informed your intellect and your journey in a manner that Jeff and your producers and others can resonate with? So that's my constant journey these days, to kind of talk to peers and other leaders to go out and try this.
Okay, and you know, even as you do this, at times it might be mistaken that, you know, by the time Vishal is writing the book, he has it all figured out. There are no more problems that he has. Now that he's moved on, he knows it, and it's just repeat, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. What are some of the challenges you face now in your new space in terms of working for yourself?
Well, I think the single biggest challenge is hiring top talent. You know, people like me are spoiled and have had great talent in our portfolio, in our companies, in our care, in our custody, in our circles for many years. Hiring that same quality top talent in your own business, in your new independent life, is a real challenge, not just because of money. You know, money is one aspect of it, because you know, there is some truth to multinationals overpaying, right? Or corporates overpaying. But the other side of it is there's perhaps in our markets, our nascent markets, there is some great brand value associated by our families, our circles, our own people to, well, I want to work for a brand. Right?
So that's
so breaking that down to attract top talent, because brand or not, we all want top talent.
True.
Right? So I think that's probably very vulnerably, that's probably the single largest challenge. And I'm getting better with it as time is going.
Okay,
right?
okay. Let's switch gears a bit and talk about, when you look at, you know, the corporate life, it also has seasons. There are times when there's a lot of activity going on. At times there's some downtime up in there. And people are approaching that particular space right now. And for most corporate leaders you'd be talking to, when there's a downtime like this, some people are enjoying summer. Right here we can't be talking about the summer.
We like northern and southern summers.
Because right here it's a whole different story. But for those people who have some downtime during this period, what would you advise for them, you know, to do in this particular time?
Look, this is a great time to take a little bit of, I would say, intellectual break away from the office. And this is about the time where I ask leaders to think of doing 5 things, okay? So some of the stuff is what you do with family, some of the stuff is what you do with yourself, but if we think about these 5 things, the first thing I would do is I would kind of say, you've assessed your business for the year. A lot of us close our books end of June, or some close, you know, end of December, but a lot of us close end of June. So you sort of say, look, you looked at your year in review at work. How about you compare your year in review with your ambitions, your aspirations, your dreams as an individual? So, you know, obviously you've thought about learning and development yourself. You thought about your financial goals. You've thought about, you know, how you want to develop and grow and promotions and all that kind of stuff. But do it in the context of how did your business perform? Look at the performance of your business, your unit, and look at your goals and ambitions. So find some alignment there, one thing to do. The second thing I would sort of say is, and I find this very useful, is do a check-in with your family. So sit down with your family and chat with them about my career life over the last year and how did it work out at home. And you get a very colorful tale about your highs and lows, being there, not being there, you know, missing school dates, not being there, I could do better. And I think that the humble journey of understanding that and listening that would serve one well. So that's kind of the second thing. The third thing I would do is, you know, a lot of us consume audiobooks today. Audiobooks have become very popular.
Right.
I kind of would call on folks to listen to the audiobook of life. And what that means is, if you listen to your children and their hopes and dreams, your wife or your spouse, and truly listen, and I'm also conditioning myself to get better, right? We all need help in this area. I think that audiobook of life is very giving and teaches you a lot. So that's kind of a third thing. The fourth thing I would do is I would switch off. Now, a lot of people, from a corporate life standpoint, have great difficulty doing this. And what I mean by switch off is emails, text messages, phone calls. And I, too, was really poor at this, but have gotten better and better as time has gone by. And I would literally leave my phone in the safe of the hotel room as we go out, you know, to the beach or whatever you want to do in this time away. So that's kind of a fourth thing. Switch off, as difficult as it is. I have difficulty, I've got to tell you these days, in my book publicity tours, switching off from social media, for instance, right? Because there's so much of inbox stuff, so much of commentary, but I think we must do. Certainly switch off from work. And the fifth thing I would say very quickly is be a hobbyist. And what that means is, in our professional lives, our work teaches us not to be a hobbyist. We're all the time driving commercial outcomes with lots of intensity. We don't have a chance to practice any kind of hobby. Right? I think that in your break time, to be a hobbyist is great revivement of one's self. So whether you're a foodie or a sport guy, or you fly, or you fish, or whatever it is that you read.
Go do that.
You know, go do that. So those 5 things, I think, would serve any executive well.
Okay, we'll have to leave it at that. Vishal, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your tips and, of course, sharing your journey as well, of course, on how to get and navigate through those spaces as well.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you so much, Vishal.